Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. I'm back for another instalment of these walk and talk vlogs where I share with you things I've been thinking about over the past week or so. And this week I've been mulling over and pondering constraint in creativity. And the reason being is that last week I decided to challenge myself to set some parameters, some constraints, some guardrails around a project. I was feeling in a bit of a creative rut, a bit frustrated, and found myself just kind of messing about, procrastinating, not getting down to really producing anything of value, or in fact anything at all. And I'll come on to exactly what I did shortly, but I think constraint is a really important thing when we are creating. And we can, as creative people, often get lost in having too much choice. And I think that's particularly the case these days, where we have so many options in terms of creative ideas, equipment, instruments, plugins, techniques, and so on. It can lead us to a place where we become a bit paralyzed by the amount of choice we have, and then we end up either just procrastinating like I was last week, or spending so long deciding how we're going to progress, or investigating new techniques, or finding out how to use a new plugin or a new pedal or a new instrument or a new synth, that we end up going nowhere. It's a bit like going to a massive supermarket in a foreign country. We go to France on a yearly basis, and I love going to France. I speak a small amount of French and I can get by, but whenever we go on holiday, one of our first things to do is to go to the supermarket, or hypermarket as they are called, because they are enormous. And you walk in and everything's in a different language, everything's labelled differently. The stores are absolutely enormous, and there's so much choice, it's mind-boggling. And so we often spend a couple of hours walking around the hypermarket trying to decide what food to buy just for that week. And it's almost overwhelming. Not just the choice, but the fact you have to spend time reading and translating ingredients, and you could quite easily spend all day in there and not come out with the right things, or indeed come out with anything at all, because you may get so frustrated. Now you'll be pleased to know that we do actually manage to conquer that particular challenge, and we do feed ourselves on holiday. But it's a bit like that with creating music, I find. And I'm extremely guilty of this. I have a large array of guitar pedals, probably too many. I have lots of plugins and different software that I use for making music. I have lots of different ideas, some of which I've picked up from others, some of which just come to me. And so sometimes when I sit down to start a new piece of music or start a new project, it'll take me ages just to focus and perhaps pick a sound, find a technique, find a theme, find a concept, and it can lead to lots of wasted time. Now, it's not always wasted time, because sometimes that process is useful. But if you're anything like me and you get easily taken down a rabbit hole trying to figure out the next step, then perhaps this video is useful for you. When I found myself in this position last week, I decided to put some constraints in place. And I set myself the challenge of writing an EP, a 4-track EP, in one day, and spending only 1 hour per track. Now, initially this was quite daunting. I thought, I'm not sure I can actually do this. I might spend the full hour just, creating and finding a nice pad sound, and it could be a complete disaster. But it actually worked surprisingly well. And I did the first track, and around the 50-minute mark, I found myself with an almost finished track. And to my surprise, I had 10 minutes actually to then spend mixing it, which ordinarily wouldn't be very much time. But because I had that challenge, that deadline of an hour, I quickly mixed it and I finished it and I played it back, and I thought, you know what? I actually quite like that. I surprised myself. And so I did another track and the same thing, and another, and then another. And by the end of the day, I had 4 tracks. Now, I'm not going to pretend they're my best work ever, but it doesn't really matter, because at the end of it, I had a 4-track EP that I was really pleased with. And I'm actually going to release it in about, I think the first track is out in about 4 weeks' time as a single. And it was such a useful exercise because I had that time constraint. I wasn't able to disappear down a rabbit hole or spend ages fiddling with settings, trying to find the perfect sound. I kind of had to go with my gut instinct, follow my ears, and not spend ages on each individual element. But it came together really nicely. Now, it may not always work out like that. I could set myself that challenge again next week and it'd be a complete disaster. But the whole point of it was, it got me out of that rut, that mind blank where I just couldn't really get down to anything or settle to anything. So maybe that's something you want to try, and I'd be interested to know if you have tried anything like that. But it's not just time constraints that we can use. And I think I might use this technique a little bit more often when I'm perhaps stuck for creative ideas. Some other thoughts I've had around setting constraints are to only use a set number of guitar pedals, for example. Just pick 2 or 3 and that's it. Just use those. Don't start adding in other elements. Or perhaps just use one instrument. Or there's so many other different things you could do. You could set yourself the challenge of only using your stock plugins on your particular DAW to really test your production skills, but also save you having to make the choice of which of 10 different reverb plugins to use. And so many other different ideas that you could use in terms of constraint. I've even had the crazy idea of trying to create a whole track just from one note. Just play one note on a guitar or a synth or a piano, record it, and then use that and manipulate that within your DAW. Pitch it, stretch it, put some effects on it, run it through different effects chains, and just using that one note, see how much you could squeeze out of that one thing. There's so many different ideas that you could use. Going back to my supermarket analogy, I suppose it would be a bit like turning up at that foreign supermarket with a pre-prepared list of exactly what you're going to get. There's still going to be some decisions to make, but rather than wandering around aimlessly, wondering what you're going to eat for each day and then having to find it and then translate it and do all the other things you need to do to fill your basket and then check out, you have some parameters, or set yourself a time limit. Right, we're going to go in and we are going to shop for an hour, which would focus you rather than wandering around aimlessly looking at all the different and interesting types of food. You'd go in knowing you had a deadline, which would speed you up. Or in my case, I think when we're on holiday and go to the supermarket shopping, we often go as a whole family, which is utter chaos because everyone splits in different directions. Everyone wants something different to eat. Everyone has a different opinion. Everyone wants to sneak something different into the trolley. I think if I just went on my own and my wife went on her own with that list and a time constraint, it would be a much more efficient process. I don't know what you think of that analogy. I think it's quite good. One of the other benefits of setting constraints, particularly as it relates to instruments or gear or pedals, is that it forces you into squeezing the most out of what you've chosen. So a guitar pedal, for example, I have, as I mentioned, probably too many, and I tend to stick to using the ones I like the best and I can get the best sounds out of. But even amongst those, some of them have lots of functions and sub-menus and things that I've never really explored. And so by setting myself the constraint of only using 1 or 2 or 3, it puts me in a place where I want to delve further into that pedal, that piece of equipment, to explore more sounds and more functions to try and make my music more interesting. So it also has that added benefit that it pushes you to be more creative with what you've already got, which I suppose in turn also can prevent us from getting that gear acquisition syndrome, thinking, well, I've got this track, I've got this project, I'm looking for a particular sound, maybe I just need that plugin, or maybe I just need another guitar pedal, maybe I need a new guitar. And you can get into lying to yourself or convincing yourself that you need another piece of equipment to get that sound, that perfect finished sound that you've been looking for and searching for, only to buy that equipment and then think, oh, actually it's not really what I was looking for, and then you've just added to your gear and spent lots more unnecessary money. There is real beauty in simplicity, and I think that's really the heart of what we're talking about here. We're not setting limitations or constraint to squash our creativity, or setting limits to prevent us from making something beautiful. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Having those parameters can be liberating. It frees us from having to make too many decisions, which can be paralyzing, and helps to focus on creating something, creating an end product. And there's absolutely time for experimenting and just seeing where it takes you. But I think if you want to have a finished article, if you want to be releasing music, if you want the satisfaction of finishing that project and letting other people hear it, then using constraint and creativity is immensely powerful. And so I'd encourage you to give it a go if it's something you've not done before. Particularly if, like me, you don't actually have an awful lot of time. Music is not my full-time gig. I do have a full-time job as well, and so I don't really have the luxury of spending hours and hours and hours just going with the flow. Sometimes I do have to just set a deadline, set a target and hit it. And it won't always work out, but then so what? You've still learnt things and you've still created something, and it's all part of that journey. So the fruit of my constrained project will be out soon, as I mentioned. I'll let you know when it's out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think. And if you have tried this and you have any finished projects, that's not even a word, projects, that's the word I was looking for, or products, take your pick, products or projects, then do send them my way. I'd love to listen. I'd love to see the finished work from your constrained project. It'd be great to join in that conversation. So as always, thank you for watching, and do put a comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts and have a chat with you. If you'd like to follow what I'm doing with my various music projects, then you can sign up to my mailing list, and there will be a link below, or you can visit my website, rafa.net. Drop me a comment, send me an email, get in touch via Instagram or anywhere else you can find me. I always love chatting to people about music in any way that I can, so do please get involved. That's it for now. I'm going to enjoy the sunset on this beautiful and warm summer evening. It's actually been a bit warm, too warm today. And when we have heat in the south of England, it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's always humid. Someone described it to me the other day as the kind of heat that comes out the back of a bus, which I thought was just brilliant. That perfectly sums up the kind of heat we've had today. But I'm not going to complain, because it will very soon be cold and wet and wintry, and I'll be longing for days like this where I can come out for a beautiful walk at 9 p.m. in the daylight. Anyway, I'm waffling on about the weather, and generally that's quite boring. So thanks for joining me again, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.